Hi again, everyone. Welcome back and welcome into UnAnchoredBoston.com with Bob Lobel. I'm Mike Lynch, and as always, we're brought to you by Cold Springs RV, your destination for all things camping. And where? Glad you asked. We're in New Hampshire, of course, and by the great George Gray, the big wheel we call him at George Gray's Lexington Toyota 409 Mass Ave in Lexington. All right, we've got a great guest today. We could talk for hours and hours and hours with him. So excited to have him here. And Lobel always handles the formal introduction. So, Robert, take it away.
Well, I bet you know all about this guy because if you're in betting, which most people are, I'm not. So this is really it. And I explained to Bill Speros, I have no idea what you're going to talk about because even when you talk about it, I'll have no idea what you're saying. I don't know, Lynchy, if you feel the same way or not, but I don't think.
I used to bet a lot when I was, but not so much the last 30 years.
Well, did you ever bet on Harvard football, Lynchy, when you played it? Just say no.
No.
Okay, that's all I need to hear. You're clear. Bill Speros is here. Bookies.com, Boston Herald, Tampa Bay, Denver Post. He's done it all. He's in Florida now, I assume, Bill. And
Yes.
Rafael Devers' jersey is why all the Boston's? What's all about that stuff behind you? We got more stuff behind you than Lynch and I do.
I know it's been a good run, and like you said, I've kind of worked everywhere, but born in Cambridge, grew up in Arlington. That never changed, and a lot of this I picked up along the way. And I got one room in the house. The wife says you get one room, and I'm making the most of it.
Yeah.
How did you get into writing? Before we talk about the nitty gritty of betting, of gambling, how did you get into the world's second oldest profession?
Well, I used to live in East Cambridge, and I love telling this story. Back before we had the state lottery, we had the number, as you know, and it was run by, let's say, not legal entities. And I remember as a kid, again, I was probably 4 or 5 years old at the time. We were still living in Cambridge. And my dad hit the number. And they came to the house and they gave him $600 in cash. That's what you used to get if you hit the number. And I had never seen so much money in my life. I was just astonished that there was even this much money to begin with. And, I was always sort of fascinated and or hooked into gambling. From then on, my best friend, Dave, shout out Dave, as soon as he got his driver's license, we would head over to Wonderland at night, Rainham on the weekends, Seabrook during the summer, betting dogs. Dave still has this. When we were at Arlington High, we took a stats class sophomore year, and our project was figuring out how many times the favorite and the number 2 and the number 3 dog won place and showed at Wonderland. And we actually got a 90 on the project. So, I was always hooked into journalism too. I was editor at the school paper in Arlington High. I went to Marquette University, lived with Chris Farley for a year. That's a story for another day, but got a journalism degree, and it's what I've always wanted to do ever since I can remember. And it's pretty much all I've ever done.
Today it's so much easier to play the numbers. First of all, it's legal now, but you had to actually work, drive to all these places if you want to make some money at it. You have to physically be present and hand over a slip. And other than calling up Guido, and settling with him on Wednesdays, that's what you had to do.
Yeah, well, obviously it's a lot different now, but yeah, when we were betting, everybody had a friend, right? Yeah. Everybody had a friend whose cousin or uncle was a bookie, right? So we had a friend whose cousin or uncle was a bookie, so we would place bets with them. Of course, now looking back, he was probably just holding the bets himself. But when we got to high school, and when we wanted more action than just betting on the dogs, 3 nights a week, we would place bets through the friend of a friend of a friend of a friend type deal. And I joke, sort of not so jokingly, had we had all this online technology, all this, legal and illegal sports betting, in your hand on your phone, I'm not sure I would have made it as a kid. I can understand it is a challenge for young people because, the legal betting sites make it very difficult for you to bet until you're of age, which in Massachusetts is 21. The illegal betting sites, not so much. So that's obviously it's a massive, it's one of many, many issues that we face in the gambling space. But I always marvel, like with the technology that's available now, if it was around when I was a kid, I'm not sure I could have made it. I always tell my boy about, back in the day when Jimmy the Greek would come on and talk about his friends in the desert think that the Giants are going to win, but not by 5 points. And, he'd give the weather report in Tampa Bay. And it's like, well, what does this matter? Who cares about the weather? Well, obviously it matters. And, you couldn't say Las Vegas during an NFL telecast. You couldn't talk about betting. And of course, now you have betting as an integral and ingrained part of the NFL. So just from that perspective of my lifetime and your lifetimes as well, it's incredible to see the arc that gambling has gone from, the words that shall not be spoken to now where it's an integral, built-in and inescapable part of watching games.
When you say integral and important part of football, we're talking not just football, we're talking every sport. I mean, this weekend you had the French Open, and this was an amazing weekend for so many things. You got French Open, you had the Belmont, you had the Pacers and OKC, you got the Panthers tonight, and you got the Red Sox and the Yankees. Like I said, the French Open, and then you got the College World Series, and you got Aaron Rodgers coming back to Pittsburgh. So
there's action available on all those markets. I actually did an Aaron Rodgers betting story. I checked the lines on every game from before and after he signed. I checked the odds on the Super Bowl, the AFC, the win totals. Only one game moved. The lines on the opener against the Jets moved a little bit, but the rest of it was pretty much static. They had really, really, really long odds to win the Super Bowl. They went from like 200 to 1 to 40 to 1 to win the Super Bowl, which is still, really not much. But like you said, and all of those events have dozens, if not hundreds, of betting markets available on each of them. You can look at the basketball game. You have props on every player, rebounds, assists, points, combined rebounds, assists, points, combined.
I could take, if I wanted to take a parlay of OKC and the Panthers, I could probably get that, right?
Of course. Oh, yeah. I mean, you can do the books like to promote what's called same game parlays. I mean, you can parlay any market. You can parlay anything. If DraftKings offers a market on the French Open and offers a market on the Red Sox, you could parlay Coco Gauff winning the French Open and Rafi Devers hitting 2 home runs last night. All of those markets are legal. And the best way to determine a legal market versus a market that can't be offered is if there's an official score of an event, if there's an organization like the WTA or the Major League Baseball or the NFL or the PGA Tour or even Live Golf or UFC, if there's an organization that oversees an event and that provides an official data, official score sheet, then your sports book will take action on it. What they don't take action on in the United States, and I've been on all the stations up there talking about this before the Super Bowl, was like, Taylor Swift's dress, like what color is her dress going to be, or will she kiss Travis Kelce after the game, or how many times they'll show her on TV. None of those markets are legal in the United States. But those sort of tend to catch attention because they are offered on offshore betting sites, illegal betting sites. And they're also offered in trading markets, which are legal, but aren't necessarily sports books. So, to your point, Bob, all of these events that occurred over the weekend, yeah, you could have you could have wagered on any discernible official outcome of any of those events.
Hey, let me ask you this. So I'm Bob Lobel. I'm new to this. I want to jump in this weekend. How do I decide between DraftKings, FanDuel, ESPN Bet, MGM, all these different platforms? How do I decide what differentiates them, or is there any difference? Does anything differentiate them?
Well, it's like anything else, right? It's like shopping for gas or shopping for groceries. You get the same gas, but some of them, one station might charge a little bit more, a little bit less. I mean, I can do a shameless plug of bookies.com, and I would say, go to bookies.com and read our reviews and see which one suits you the best. And my company works, we refer customers to all these legal sports books in all the states where they're allowed. And, we get a fee or a percentage of what the customer bets. That's how my company works. So my role in all this is still as a journalist to, report on the industry, to cover the industry like you would cover the Red Sox or the Patriots, and, sort of let people know, not only answer your question, but to also look at what's going on in terms of, and okay, here's a good example in Massachusetts. There's a bill proposed right now in the state Senate that would hike the tax rate sportsbooks pay from 20 to 51%. That's a huge deal. They just did that in Illinois. That's a major issue for the industry. And it will eventually affect the customers because the odds that the sports books charge are going to go higher and higher. And to your question about what book should you choose, I would really look at what you want to bet on. In other words, if you wanted to bet on the Yankees and Red Sox this weekend, and you just wanted to bet on the Red Sox to win, you could look at the different books, or again, shameless plug alert, go to bookies.com or OddsJam, which is another company we own, shameless plug alert, and look at the lines being offered by each sports book. So one sports book might have the Red Sox, slightly favored to win because Garrett Crochet, I think he's pitching Friday. I'm not sure. So I would take your question and say, shop around, figure out what you want to bet on before you decide what book you want to use. And then look at the sports books, and you can access them all without signing up or anything. And then look at the one that offers the best price at what you want to bet. For instance, if you want to bet the over in the Red Sox game, and it's 9.5 runs at BetMGM, but it's only 9 runs at ESPN Bet, then bet the over at ESPN Bet because you're getting that extra half run. So it's really a shop around question. I mean, in Massachusetts, they all follow the same rules. They're all regulated by the Mass Gaming Commission. They all follow the same rules in terms of, handling your deposits, making your payments in a timely manner. The legal books will protect your identity. So it's really more a question of what you want to bet and what is the best price on what you want to bet. And then you could go to that particular book and play. What happens with most people is, like, for instance, in Massachusetts, as you guys remember, when they launched sports betting 2 years ago in Massachusetts, there was a flood of ads every single night on your former stations and, of course, on the Sports Hub and EEI and everywhere else, pushing DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, Barstool, back then ESPN Bet Now, because what they do is when a market opens up, they saturate the market with ads to try to get people to sign up to that particular book. Because what normally happens, like anything else, we're creatures of habit, and you don't really want to go through 6 apps on your phone. So you just sort of get settled on one sports book and you tend to stay with that one. So, if you're betting a lot of money and you're betting often, you have probably 4 or 5 that you shop around because you're really trying to look at the best price. If you're just betting $20 in a weekend on the Patriots, or $50 or whatever your budget allows, then you probably just tend to stick with one book for convenience sake.
I assume when they brought in legalized gambling, other than the revenue, maybe that doesn't really tell the story of that statement. Other than the revenue, I assume that that illegal betting would have been severely damaged, but it doesn't sound that way at all. It sounds like when legal betting came in, illegal betting profited just as much.
It's a great point. Since the state launched sports betting, retail began January 20th, 2023. Online began March 10th, 2023. The Commonwealth has taken in over $260 million in revenue, right? That's roughly twice what the projected revenue was going to be. So that's $267 million the Commonwealth didn't have that it has now. But what happens is legal sports books are not only regulated, but they work on very small margins. The average hold, which that's an industry term, it's just profit. The average profit that a sports book will have will be about 8% of all the money they take in. They pay back about 90 to 92% of all the money they take in. So they're working on relatively small margins compared to their overall handle. So what happens is betting becomes legal. Lots of people sign up. Lots of people, begin betting because it is legal, and no one wants to do anything that's stigmatized. But then what'll happen is they'll start winning, and then they'll be limited in terms of how much they can bet. By sportsbook, it's called bankrupt or broke. It's kind of the industry term where there's a belief that sports books will take the 10% of each extreme and sort of weed out the sharp bettors or the really good ones who tend to bet a lot and might actually win a lot, and push the lower 10% who bet a lot but don't win a lot until they can no longer bet. So what happens with that top 10%, those guys end up moving to offshore books because the legal sports books won't take their action anymore. And you also have people who want to bet with credit. In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, it is illegal for any sports book to take credit cards. It's against the law. Crypto's against the law. Everything is cash directly from your bank account, or if you're on site, you wager in cash. Offshore books take credit cards. So, someone who might have been betting legally on one of the sites that's legally licensed in Massachusetts, runs out of money, can bet offshore with a credit card until they burn through that credit limit. So you've added to the pool of people who gamble. But because of that, you've also added who gamble legally. You've also added to the pool who people who gamble illegally. And the industry's argument to this, and we're starting to see this in a lot of different states, and it's coming in Massachusetts. You're finally starting to see states issue cease and desist orders against these offshore books, and they're shutting them down. They're shutting them down in Michigan. They're shutting them down in Ohio. They're shutting them down in New Jersey. And of course, this is Massachusetts, so everything gets into the weeds and it's all politics. The Gaming Commission in Massachusetts doesn't have any criminal enforcement abilities. All they can do is fine and sanction legal sports books. They have no say over illegal sports books. That's the job of the Attorney General. So there's kind of a struggle right now to get the Attorney General in Massachusetts to go after and have these illegal books shut down. So you're right, and that's a challenge that the industry's facing, and I've written a lot about it. Why are these illegal books growing when the legal market's growing? And the industry's point is because you're not shutting them down, meaning the state. New Jersey, for instance, the Gaming Commission is part of the Attorney General's office. They have criminal, they can prosecute someone criminally. The same with Michigan, and Massachusetts is just a regulatory agency. So there's a little bit of the industry is still very much in flux. It's still very much growing and maturing. So, that's something that's being dealt with, probably not fast enough.
Here's something that blew me away, Bill. During the NCAA hockey championship, I had a friend who gets hired by the NCAA to do particular games. He was having a conversation with a Boston University athletic director, and the BU athletic director said to him, Guess how much money was bet on BU basketball this year? And he said, I have no idea. And the athletic director said 37 million. Does that surprise you?
And
BU basketball. I
none
mean,
of that was legally bet in the Commonwealth, because in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you cannot bet on BU basketball unless they're playing in a tournament. So I'm not surprised.
BU basketball. I mean, seriously, outside of like 128, who's even heard of BU? My dad played for BU back in the 50s, but you know I was just slayed over that. But yeah,
Well, it is a high number. You know, especially when, like you said, you don't think that people bet on it. But you know, there are certain states, like Colorado releases revenue bet by sport. So in the state of Colorado, you can see like how much money is bet on each sport. And one of the top 5 sports every month is table tennis. So there are a lot of people who will bet on anything. And the funny thing about table tennis, the reason why it's so popular is because it's the only action during the day in the United States. Because these games are played in Asia and in Russia. Well, not Russia, they don't take action there, but in Europe and Asia. So you have table tennis games going on in Korea, in Japan, and in China that are occurring midday in the United States. And so for people who want to bet on live action, lots of times that's the only live action on at like noon on a Monday. So to your point about BU basketball, it's probably a case where a lot of those bets were placed in parlays if someone felt like BU was either a lopsided favorite or a lopsided underdog. And so that bet was used to sort of be at one leg in a group of other wagers, to where, okay, BU is playing Team X and they've beaten Team X Vermont. I don't even know who they play, but they've beaten whatever Assumption, you know, the last 25 years in a row. So I'm going to but even the odds are really long. They're, you know, minus 500, meaning you have to bet 500 to 100. But you put that in a parlay against other things to just sort of help the odds with the other events. That's normally what happens with a lot of these small colleges. Very few people are betting them outright. They much more bet them as part of parlays with other schools.
Listen, you're the expert here. The guy went to Harvard. The guy above you went to Harvard.
See,
You went to Marquette. I just went to Kent State. I don't know what
I went to Harvard Square a lot.
Well,
we would take the 77 bus.
Osmosis, it's really kind of helped out too.
I couldn't spell Harvard, but we'd go to Strawberries whenever new records came out, and we'd go to the arcade, and we'd go to the out of town and into Harvard Coop, and you know, maybe look at certain magazines that you couldn't find in Arlington.
Oh, you always got Nini's Corner. You got any?
Oh my God! Come on, would you guys just stop?
But I did not go to Harvard.
There's something in the brain.
Marquette.
I know. You and Al McGuire.
No, you know who else? Let me tell you something.
Well,
two guys I know that went to Marquette, and they both went to Arlington High School. Bill Speros and Joe Britannia. Both went to Arlington High School, and both went to Marquette. After he went to Harvard, he went to Marquette Journalism School.
Well, I always say, you know, Harvard is the Marquette of the East.
Right.
This is good. Well, Trump hasn't found you yet, but hang on, baby.
Hey, I'm in Florida, man. I got like quintuple immunity.
Okay. All right. Trying to get back to my original question, which
what's that question about?
I almost don't remember, but I do know that, like the world's oldest profession and now the world's second oldest profession, there's something in the brain that causes, and I'm really kind of dead serious about this, that drives people. Well, there's no sure thing, and that's why there's gambling. It drives people to do it, whether it's biological or spiritual or just a greed gene, for lack of a better term. There's something in there that causes people to put up the warnings. If you have a gambling problem, please call 1-800-BILL-SPEROS.
Well, I think you're right. I think it covers it all. Look, I'm Greek, and gambling has been a part of my life ever since I can remember. I would play church raffles. I learned how to play roulette at the church picnic. You know, for me, it was just a part of my culture that was as part of the dances and the food and everything else. There's a lot of studies being done right now, both inside and outside of the gaming industry, to figure that out, to prevent problem gaming and what you cite those disclaimers. And again, I don't want to get into the weeds too much, but there's a difference between responsible gaming and problem gaming. Responsible gambling is, okay, Mike, you want to bet this weekend. You've checked the odds. You have a budget set aside of the amount of money you can afford to lose. And you just stick within that budget. Win or lose, you don't go beyond that budget. You don't chase your losses. And you say, okay, I made my bet. It didn't win. I'll bet again next week. That's responsible gambling. Problem gambling is the Red Sox lost, but I really like the Dodgers tonight at 10. I'm going to put another $50 on a Mookie 2-home run parlay. And I got to take the money out of the savings account to do that. Or I'm taking my wife's debit card. That's problem gaming. I mean, that's the difference sort of between being responsible when you bet versus problem gambling.
But that's the rule. That's the rule, not the exception. Wouldn't you think so? Problem gambling?
Well, it's the rule in terms of people with gambling problems. It's about 3%. And that number hasn't changed since gambling was legalized. About 3% of the people who bet on a regular basis are considered problem gamblers. That percentage hasn't changed. The number of problem gamblers has grown because gambling has grown. So the pool is much larger. The number is much larger. The percentage is the same. So, the bill proposed in Massachusetts by Senator Keenan, and I interviewed him at length about it. And I really his argument is that, to Bob's point, that genetic physiological part that causes problem gambling, and this is his argument, is that it's the same part of the brain that causes opioid addiction. And that's why he wants to heavily regulate not only betting, but advertising and promotions and a whole bunch of other things. Other states are considering the same type of bills. The gambling industry, obviously, they counter that because they say that where's the scientific evidence? And their argument, it's funny. They had an issue here in Massachusetts a year ago. And I mentioned earlier about restricting bettors who win. They cut you off. You can go online and you'll see people complaining about this all the time. And right now in Massachusetts, they're trying to figure out what to do about that. So they had a hearing a year ago, and they asked all the legal operators in the state to come in and meet with the Gaming Commission. And they all said no, which was a big mistake on their part. So the Gaming Commission gave them one more chance and said, okay, guys, we're going to give you another kind of do-over. And the Gaming Commission, I spoke to many of the members on and off the record, and they were obviously beyond pissed. And there was rumblings about pulling licenses and, 7-figure fines. And so the operators went back and they had a public hearing with the operators and then a public hearing with the public. So right now the state is in the middle of trying to figure out how to handle that. Why do operators cut people off when they win, but don't necessarily cut them off when they lose? That discussion is going on. Of course, again, it's Massachusetts. Might take 600 years, but it's a discussion that's going on in Massachusetts, and Massachusetts is the first state in the country to begin to address this problem. So what they eventually do about it is probably going to be followed elsewhere. But sort of this is a huge thing that the industry is looking at right now, because they're going to do whatever they can do until they're told not to. So at the same time, they're facing lawsuits. from people who claim their spouses were, it was as a predatory practice to go after them, problem gamblers, irresponsible gamblers. So all these issues that you guys raise are all, sort of in the middle of being addressed, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Before I do my camping commercial, which is a big gamble in itself, I want to ask you one quick question about, and Lynchy and I would, I think, agree on this. When you read the line in the paper about the upcoming NFL games, if it's on any given Sunday, okay, you say, how do those guys get it so right? How do they, week in, week out, right, Lynchy?
Yep.
How do they get it?
Mind blowing. Yeah.
How do they get it so right so often?
Well, they all use, it's all numbers. I would, Billy Walters, who was a legendary gambler, got involved with Phil Mickelson, all that. I read his book is fantastic because he does 3 chapters on exactly that, on how they set the lines. And it all comes down to, I think he said he had 53 different variables when he was handicapping a football game. And every single one of them is assigned a point value, whether it's coaching, weather, running game versus defense, passing attack versus passing defense, offensive line, defensive line. Where's the game being played? What time of day is it being played? Is it a Thursday night game? All of these things are, put into numerical form. And that's sort of the answer to your question, is that everything's put in a numerical form. All of the things that you guys would talk about, or that they would talk about, on the Sports Hub or EEI, when you talk about the Patriots, like how's the defense going to do? How's the offense going to do? The odds makers, and the great thing about them is everything is antiseptic to them, right? They have the ability to completely shed emotion when making these decisions, which I think is a lot of it, frankly. I think that's a lot of the secret sauce, is that you're able to shed your emotions and your personal feelings and just look at these things with a sort of antiseptic view. I do a lot better picking college games than I do NFL games, because the college games, I have no even thoughts on them beyond looking at, Texas versus Oklahoma. I don't care who wins, but I know Texas has got a great offensive line. And that's really what it is. It's just putting a number on every piece of datum that you can, and then you just do the math, and that's how you'll get your point spread. That's how you'll get your totals. And of course, now with AI and generative AI, you're having all of that done in real time. And that's how you're getting your in-game line of, and NBA games. You follow an NBA game on DraftKings, and the line changes after every point. And that's basically algorithms and now some AI involved, because they get a real-time data stream from the NBA saying, here's what happened. And then their computer will react to that in real time and then post a number, because you have to remember every game you're watching is on delay, right? So their live stream is always ahead of what you're seeing because there's no delay there. So by the time you see it, they've already accounted for the change, and then you make a difference. So it's a combination of experience, technology, and, just sort of the lack of emotion that skews fandom.
Wow.
Bill, before we go to the commercial, the worst thing that can happen to a novice bettor is to win your first bet.
Dude, you read my mind. I mean, that was a
One of my
mind.
skills.
I don't know. That's
You
a
are
little frightening.
1
No, to hear that
billion
conversation,
% correct.
so frightening for someone listening to both of you. Okay. What planet are you guys from? Okay.
No, it is. It's. I remember the first bet I ever made. I was just out of college. I was living across from a Tufts football stadium over in Somerville. And a buddy of mine who was very conservative guy says, we're doing a 2-team tease. So the Pittsburgh Steelers always covered. They were given 6 points, but you could add or subtract 6 points to the spread. So all the Steelers have to do was win. And then I parlayed them with somebody else, like maybe the Cowboys or something. I played $25. this is easy. You got to be kidding me. This is the easiest thing. And then I wound up chasing the whole year. I'm chasing 4 o'clock game. I'm chasing Monday night game. And then
Well, that's
Wednesday.
what young men tend to do. I mean, I was that way, and I think a lot of it too is, the operators tell me off the record, of course, their audience is 21 of age to 30. Really, that's when they really want to make hay, because I think what happens, with me, I quit gambling. I found girls and my wife. So, I had, number one, remember, the world's oldest profession, that took precedence without the monetary exchange. So, I think what happens is it is still 70% men. And it is, like you said, Mike, it's young men exactly in your position, but instead of waiting to place your bet through your friend, you're doing it in real time right here. And it's instantaneous.
Yep.
I was going to ask you the men versus women, but you guys answered that. Women.
It's about 70-30, pretty much every industry study I've seen.
And let me do this. You're probably not a camper, are you, Bill?
I was when my son was a Boy Scout.
Really? Well, that's good. Well, then you can relate to this, because we have a place called Cold Springs RV. It's in Ware, New Hampshire, which is west of Goffstown and north of Kingsborough.
My aunt and uncle lived in New Boston for many years.
Oh, well, there you go. It's right next door. It's right. Bill Mom Mukat used to live up in there.
They lived right down the street from him.
Isn't that interesting?
We used to walk up and visit with him all the time.
He was the best. He was absolutely the best.
My aunt said, "Oh yeah, because I was a little kid. I'm like, oh my God, this guy used to play for the Red Sox."
Yeah.
My aunt said, "Oh yeah, he said he wants to meet you guys." My brothers and I walked up there, and he was doing work in the yard. And again, I'm a little kid. I'll just never forget. He's working there, shirts off, and his pitching arm was like 3 times the size. It was crazy. I still remember that. Yeah, Bill Mambo Ked, he lived right up Boston Post Road in New Boston.
Medford guy too.
Medford guy, you're right. Medford. Yeah, Bill. I mean, it was such a great. Okay, I'll finish this, because that's where our campers are. Cold Springs RV recreational vehicle. By the way, was first used in 1934. A little historical fact, just to confuse you in the show.
How old were you then, Bob?
That was my parents were chasing the first. Whatever, never mind. We ask you to freely browse in a pressure-free environment and find the RV of your dreams. There are all kinds of different RVs. There's recreational vehicles, there's pop-ups, there's campers, there's fifth-wheelers or travel trailers. That's how how do you think the horses get to Saratoga? Travel trailers. They use RVs, right? Nothing but the best for those guys. Those are pretty amazing horses. That's sovereignty and journalism. That was a pretty amazing. It was a whole amazing weekend, actually. When now we're getting Alcaraz coming back to 3 match points to beat Sinner. I don't know. Shut up, Bob, and stop doing the sports and do the commercial. I know. Okay, here we go. You can make this a summer to remember with a camper from Cold Springs RV. They're in the movies: Breaking Bad, Nomadland, Twister, all those things. RVs are a big part of their life, big part of your life. Pressure-free Cold Springs dealer in Ware, New Hampshire, or you can go on coldspringsrv.com. Thank you very much. Bill, Mike's got a question for you, I'm sure, and this will be an interesting answer.
All right. We don't pay our guests, obviously. But remember when John Madden had the Madden Cruiser because he wouldn't fly anywhere? Well, Cold Springs RV is in the process of building a Lobel Lynchy Cruiser. It's going to be
there you go.
Yeah, it's going to surpass. So as a gesture to all our guests that come on the show, we're going to give you access to use of the Lynchy Lobel Cruiser for 1 week. We'll deliver it to you in Florida. You can drive to the West Coast, and we'll fly you back. The only problem is you got to pick one person, male, female, alive to see sports, entertainment, government, you name it, to ride shotgun with you across the country. You can have a conversation with and have some fun with, and we'll fly you both back to wherever you want to go. Who would you choose to ride shotgun with you.
So it could be deceased.
Could be deceased, Chuck. Could
Oh
be.
my God, that's so easy for me. Ted Williams.
All right.
I mean, I would, even though I've read every book ever written about him, I would just say go and start in Florida and go to San Diego where he grew up on Utah Street and go by his home and check where he used to play and have him regale me with stories about the Red Sox and the Yankees and the Marines. And, the over under on profanity per minute would be like 72.5.
Bill,
Like Ted would drop more F bombs than the Enola Gay, right? I mean,
Bill, I can give you 5 words in a row that he said in a sentence playing golf that I've never heard strung together, and every one of them is unusable on this show. And we're not even regulated by the FCC.
but that would
5
be.
words that made up a sentence.
I met him once at Winter Haven when I was a kid. We hung around and snuck back there at Chain of Lakes Park and got his autograph and still have the ball with his autograph and Yaz and Jim Rice. So that would be it for me. I would just love to hear him. I did a story when David Ortiz broke his record. That's the picture in the press pass from that game. I covered that game for Bleacher Report. And before the game, I was actually tracked down Ted's daughter and spoke to her. And she was like impossible to talk to. I think the only other person who ever spoke with her was a fellow from ESPN. Oh God, I forget his name. Southern guy, does the talkovers for college football. But I was the second reporter to ever speak to her. And even to get her through to her, I tracked down her husband was an attorney, and my wife's an attorney in Florida. And of course, the Florida bar has contact information for every attorney. So I reached out to her husband and I called him, told him who I was, told him I was doing a story on David Ortiz breaking Ted Williams' Red Sox record and wanted to know what Ted would have thought about it. And I had read her book, and she apparently loved the idea. So she spoke to me on the phone, and it turned out to be a great story because she was like, "Oh, Ted would have loved it." That was the headline, right? So yeah, I mean that was really cool to have her talking, and she was very interesting because she said to me, she goes, "Oh, people always say like, what do you know about baseball?" And she goes, "My father was the greatest hitter of all time, and I used to watch games with him." And she told me, she used to say, "Oh yeah, I would watch games with my dad, and he would just sit there nonstop and just go through everything." And I thought that was really, really interesting. So no, I've been fascinated with Ted. Number 2 would be Bill Russell. If I get them together, that would be cool. But yeah, it's a great question.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you.
Bill and I are thinking the same, Bob.
And the other thing with Ted too is my dad was a Korean War veteran. And so my whole life, my father always said, Ted went to Korea. With my dad, he was in the Air Force. For him, that was it. Like he always said, look, Ted went to Korea. And my father was in Japan working on F-86s. And so for him to see Ted Williams, despite his obviously not wanting to go, as we know, for my old man, that was it. So my whole life, I was like, Ted Williams was like a demigod in my house. So it just sort of added to all that.
Well, go ahead. I'm just getting back to the gambling thing, and I couldn't agree with you more on the Ted Williams selection.
Well, let me ask you this, Bill. Football is here, obviously.
Yes.
That's exactly where I'm going, Lynch. Okay, we have great minds. I'm just thinking you read my mind.
All right, so the football is here. What's number 2?
NBA.
NBA, huh?
Yep. And it's because of demographics and the fact that you have, 80 odd games plus the playoffs.
Yeah.
But football, if you want to add college football, it is like 3x, 4x above everything else.
Yeah.
And that's why, when I'm doing handicapping or picks, we all do picks, right? I do NFL picks every week, and I don't do them straight. I try to do them with a little bit of snark and a little bit of, cynicism or whatever. And I used to work for USA Today, and our picks are picked up by one of their papers that puts them out there, which is great for our website. It gives us a ton of visibility and a ton of backlinks, which my bosses love. But yeah, football, I mean, half my year, I have sort of two different schedules for work. And from August 15th through the Super Bowl, my schedule is all football pretty much all the time. And I do the Oscars as well, because you can legally bet on the Oscars in Massachusetts. I love doing the Oscar betting. Oscar betting, I love it. It's so much fun. That's kind of my surprise thing. Like, what don't you know about me? What you don't know about me is my fantasy is to be on the red carpet at the Oscars wearing a bow tie, talking about betting and asking Brad Pitt if he's betting on himself to win the Oscar for F1. But I love Oscar betting and the NFL, and that's literally half my year.
Will that ever happen? Betting, somebody on the red carpet talking about betting?
I would hope so. I don't know why it wouldn't. It's right now it's legal in 7 states. Most states don't. It's obviously not legal in California. It's not legal in Las Vegas either.
Really?
That's pretty.
Yeah, it's funny. Nevada is super duper regulated. Like online betting in Nevada, it's very difficult because you have to register in person at a casino. They don't want online betting in Nevada for obvious reasons. They want you to go to the casino. But they do allow it for people from California who go to Nevada and want to bet online. But yeah, they do allow Oscar betting in Massachusetts, which was kind of a surprise. There's a handful of states that do it. Of course, there's legal betting in Canada. In Canada, you can bet on all that Taylor Swift stuff in Ontario. FanDuel, BetMGM, DraftKings, they all operate legally in Ontario. And in Canada, you can bet on the weather. You can bet on politics. You can bet on Taylor Swift. You can bet on who's going to win, the Survivor, who's going to, win.
How about Jordan? How about Bill Belichick and Jordan Hudson?
I'm sure there are markets.
How about Trump and Musk?
Huh?
Trump and Musk.
They're right now at Kalshi, which is a legal trading market in Massachusetts. You can bet on Kalshi. They have 7 or 8 different Elon Musk, Donald Trump markets, which I actually wrote about on Friday. Stuff like, are they going to unfollow each other on social media? Is Trump going to sue Musk? Is Trump going to ban Twitter? Will they get together? Meaning, will they appear together in public? So those, you can actually trade on those markets legally in Massachusetts. It's not sports betting, but it is gambling. It's regulated by the federal government. It's considered a commodities trade in much the same way you would trade futures on silver or gold. You can just trade a future on whether or not Trump and Musk are going to make up.
Even like NIL, I don't see how you can, like BC gets a quarterback from Alabama, NIL. I mean, that's got to, or North Carolina gets a new head coach, Belichick. Well, how does that affect? What do we know about North Carolina? What are they projected to do? What's Boston College projected to do? What are the Patriots? Maybe we should get to the local stuff. What do you look at the Patriots over and under? How many wins do you think the Patriots are going to get?
Their win total right now has gone up. It opened at 7.5. Now it's at 8.5. And it's because of the schedule. And I'm in the middle of a project I do every year. It's called I created an algorithm to determine the watchability of NFL games. And I weigh a whole bunch of different factors, pretty much the same way people bet a spread. And, I do this and I go through all 272 games. And I swear to God, the Patriots are playing Cleveland and Carolina every week this year. I mean, their schedule is so soft. It's the second softest schedule when you calculate last year's record and this year's projected win totals. They have the second easiest schedule in the NFL. I want to bet the under, But I look at that schedule and it's like, oh my God, how can they not win like at least 9 games? They've made so many improvements. You know, they've totally upgraded the lines on both ends. I love Drake May. I can't imagine Josh McDaniels screwing him up. You know, if Steph Diggs lays off the pink powder and shows up, at least they'll have a target. But of course, every game is going to be like what, 17-14 pretty much. Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah.
So
I think you're right.
I'd almost, and again, this is where the emotion comes into it, right?
Yeah.
Like we were talking about before. If I wasn't a Patriots fan, I'd bet the under, only because going from 4 wins to 9 wins in 1 year is a huge jump. Like, that's a massive jump.
Yeah.
And only like 2 or 3 teams a year do that. So I think if you're antiseptic about it, I think the smart play is the under. You're getting a better price. But the guy with like 8 Drake May jerseys that used to be Mac Jones jerseys, and then I bought the May and ironed it over Jones. I bet the Red Sox to make the playoffs every year just to give me something to root for, right? That's what I do. Although I did bet the under 2 years ago and I hit on that. But I'll just, again, like you said earlier, it's, you want to, that's really what the industry wants to portray, is people like, oh, you like the Red Sox to win the World Series at 25-1, put $10 on them. It gives you something to root for. It adds a little bit to the experience of watching a game.
Let me ask you this. Is this bet available, the next Boston team to win a championship? Is that bet available?
I don't think that market's available, but I would imagine if you asked for it, they'd probably give you a number if you went to Everett.
Well, what do you guys think the answer to that question is? What would you?
What I would think, I would probably have to still stick with the Celtics.
Lynchy?
Let me ask you, following up with the Celtics right there. You bet the series before the series started for the Celtics to beat the Knicks. Tatum goes down with the Achilles. How do you scramble to try to make back your loss? Because you've lost the bet, right? When he goes down
again,
in the series. Yeah.
There's two answers to that question. The first answer is, you take the L and you figure out how much money you've got left over in your budget, and you maybe try to bet them to win game 5, right?
Yeah.
Then bet them to lose game 6, which I did. So, I think in that case, again, you have to look at the situation, right? He got hurt. You always have that kind of bounce back game, right? Like that game 5, that was like the Dallas win last year in game 4. It was like a total mirage.
Yeah.
But you had one night where you had an opportunity to make money betting on the Celtics, right?
Yeah.
And then game 6 was like reality check.
Yeah.
So that's how I handled it. I didn't bet them. I just didn't like the price on them to win the title. It was way too high. They were like 3-1, plus 300 is equal to 3-1. They're like plus 350 all year, and that's just not enough.
Yeah.
Last year I liked that price. This year not. Last year they were like only 1.5 plus 150 to win the title all year. Certainly later in the season. So their number was a little bit longer this year, but it was still way too high. At least I thought so. So I didn't bet it.
Let me ask this. Could you bet on who the next pope was going to be when
Glad you asked that question.
Again.
My next pope odds story, I believe, was the most trafficked story on our website this year.
Really?
Again, well, we serve the UK, right? And in the UK, that was all anybody was betting on, because you can legally bet on that. And again, you can legally bet on that in Canada. And there are trading markets which did, I think Kalshi did $7 or $8 million in trades on the Pope. There was a lot of money traded legally in the U.S., bet illegally in the U.S., and bet legally overseas on the Pope. And in terms of us, I mean, I was updating that story every day, and for us, it got a ton of traffic. and it got a bunch of backlinks from, legacy media. And now that was big. Next Pope was very big. That was a unicorn right there.
So how do you get in football? You have all these variables, as you said, weather and the pass defense, etc. But where do you get any information during conclave? They're all locked.
Well, you don't. That's the dirty little secret, right? You're just throwing darts. Pope Leo the 14th was, I think, 250 to 1. Because basically what they did was they lumped all the American popes together, or the American cardinals. It was him, it was Timothy Dolan. It was another cardinal, I think, from Los Angeles. And they were like plus 250, although his price moved during the conclave to 100 to 1. So there was, again, everything is secret until it's not secret. But there was definitely.
What do you think the Cardinals were calling up their bookies?
I think they might have had the, Fan Duola in Italy maybe, and we're moving some money. But there were some credible, Pope reporter types or commentators, priests and such who do media that actually said that Leo was the guy to watch. So there were some insiders, not necessarily inside the conclave, but inside the church, who thought that he was going to be the guy. And there was a reason, because he was very much, he was considered, I guess, the foreign minister of the Vatican. And he was handpicked by Benedict because, he had done the work in Peru. And so he was a favorite of Benedict. And he was viewed as a guy that would continue all the good things that Benedict had done and maybe not go to extremes elsewhere. And he was also, I think, a very safe choice, right? And when you have a thing like the conclave where you have 80 people voting and you have to get 2/3 and you have a whole bunch of votes, you end up with a consensus candidate in that situation. You never get someone who's like the hardcore favorite of one side or the other, but you'll always get a consensus guy. And he was very much considered that. So there were some people who, to their credit, picked him ahead of time because of that.
So when does the window close? When you see the white smoke, or when he walks out on the balcony?
Well, the trading markets, actually, they kept going. I mean, there were some people who were very quick, who actually were able to get money in the trading markets after news broke that he was going to be the Pope at like 90 plus, 10 cents to the dollar, meaning they won 90 cents per share. So, but obviously when you're talking about sports and events, it's a little different, because back in the day, you didn't have in-game betting. You only had halftime lines. Now the line never stops moving. So there is, in the NFL, total passing yards, total rushing yards, all that stuff closes once the game begins. But your in-game line never stops. It just changes.
It's always, I'm watching something on Netflix. In fact, Ted Williams is going to be on Netflix, by the way. They're doing a documentary. So I'm looking at the Red Sox game on my phone, okay? But I'm looking at the line, the percentage to win. I just don't get that. I mean, I know it's algorithms and all those things you talk about. And it must be the easiest thing in the world to come up with, because they come up with it instantly.
Well, again, all it is they're taking the however many baseball games that they have records of. It's 162 games times 30 teams times probably 100 years of data. So all they're doing is looking at, okay, over the entire history of baseball, how many teams with a 2-run lead with 2 outs in the top of the 8th inning have won?
Really?
Over the entire history of baseball. And because technology can instantaneously deliver that answer, you have that percentage of past performance based on hundreds of thousands of previous outcomes. So that's all it is math done at really.
No, but that's really fascinating to me, because now I have an answer as to, I can understand that. now. Before knowing that, I couldn't understand it. But
And
now
I'll tell you this, because I do this a lot. I always like to see where my mind is at before I look at odds, just to see how close I am. And I've gotten a lot better at it. And I would imagine if you were watching a Red Sox game and you assess the situation in your head, and then you said, okay, what is the percentage of them winning in this particular situation? Like last night, they were up 11-5 going into the bottom of the ninth, and everybody in the universe knew Judge was going to hit that home run, right? So I said to my wife, I said, he's going to hit a 700-foot home run in this inning. But even, in that situation, you're like, there's no way even the Red Sox are going to blow this, right? So your percentage is probably 95, 90, and then you go online and you can actually look at what the numbers say. So most people come pretty close in their heads when they do that. It's just here now, especially because of, and it's funny because the percentage you see on ESPN is just the numerical percentage of the betting line that's on ESPN Bet. So if the Red Sox are minus 300 to win, that's roughly a 75% probability of outcome. And that's all that is. It's just translating that number into a probability. Like, even money is plus 100, 1-to-1, 50% probability that it's going to happen, right? Because it's one or the other. 2-to-1 is a 33% probability that it's going to happen because it's 2/3 saying no, 1/3 saying yes. That's all it is. It's you're translating those odds into probability.
I wish we could talk. Wish we had more time to talk. I have so many things to ask you, and I'll finish this up. And I know Lynchy's got to do a final commercial. I don't know if he knew Bob Newmeyer at all, but he was.
I never met Bob. I knew of him and admired him greatly.
He was and I worked with him for a long time. And he offered to teach me his theories, and I said no thanks. I'm
He was
afraid
a brilliant handicapper.
I'm afraid of it. I told him. I said I can't. Don't do this. But he was never afraid to lose, and I thought that was one of the.
Well, if you're gambling, you have
to. If you're gambling, you cannot, as Lynchy said, you can't chase your losses. You're not. He's never was afraid to lose, and he lost big and he won big, and it just to me is a certain mindset that I could never overcome personally.
Yeah, I understand.
But it was just really, it was a fascinating way to. But I just noticed, as you said, you can't be afraid to lose if you're going to gamble, right?
Well,
right. So answer me this one, Bill. Let's go back to 1990. I put you in a time capsule, okay? And we just opened it today in the year 2025. What bet, like you just told me about the Pope, all the action, that blew me away. What would blow you away on things that are bet on? Not the obvious, the NBA, NFL, et cetera, et cetera. What would blow you away? The things that are bet on right here. The Pope blew me away. Is there anything else? Something will blow you away?
Well, it's funny. They started doing Oscar odds in Las Vegas during the 80s as a publicity stunt to get coverage in the LA Times and in the Hollywood trades, right?
Yep.
You still can't bet on the Oscars in Las Vegas, but they talk about it every year because it's publicity, OG publicity. But I tell you, what honestly would have surprised me in 1990 is the amount of money now bet on women's college basketball. It was astronomical the last 2 years because of Caitlin Clark. And it has fed it. It was a major part of it was 3.1 billion bet legally this year on the men's and women's NCAA tournament. And last year, when Caitlin Clark was playing, 2024, there were, of the top 10 games bet between the men's and the women's tournament, 3 of those games were games that she played in. There were actually 3 women's games that outranked all but 7 of the men's games in that tournament. So I think that would have really surprised me, the amount of money that's bet on women's sports. And it's, again, getting back to removing your emotion. And it's like, hey, if you think you can make money, I mean, we all know people who will bet on anything that moves, right? So I think the fact that particularly basketball, much more so than any other women's sport, because I think in tennis, it always seems so lopsided. You have that one dominant star, and it's like, you want to bet on Coco Gauff, you're going to get 20 cents on the dollar. Is that really worth it? But I think in basketball, you have, people that look at it as a money-making endeavor or a potentially money-making endeavor. So that would probably be the biggest betting surprise, aside from the technology, of course.
Let me get this quick spot in here before we let you go, Bill. Hey, if you're looking for a new vehicle, go where Lobel and Lynchy go. Go see our good friend George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. We've been customers for years because we know that George Gray will treat you right. They're family-owned and operated dealership that we trust, and you can trust as well. Go see the great George Gray, the big wheel we call him, at Lexington Toyota, 409 Mass Ave in Lexington. Mass Ave runs right from where Bill grew up in Cambridge, right through Arlington. It's right there. And maybe we could get a line on how many RAV4s that George Gray is going to sell this month. Could there be an over-under on that?
I would say over, because of concerns over tariffs, and all of his vehicles are in stock. So I would probably go over on car sales, at least until, the vehicles that aren't in the country get in the country.
All right. So there we go. George Gray, you got it. We're going for the over on.
Both my cousins drive RAV4s. Of course, one's in Florida, so I don't know. That was purchased in Tampa. I'm not sure my nephew's purchased, but my brother bought them both RAV4s, and they love them. So
yeah, he's been a big sponsor of ours, and boy, it is amazing. We can bet on everything. Is the sun coming out this afternoon here in Boston?
Well, you can, again, on the, and it's a distinction without a difference. You can trade on weather. You can't bet on it, at least in the U.S. When I talk about gambling, I always try to keep it to the U.S., or with you guys, I focus on Massachusetts for obvious reasons. But it is interesting because there are 39 states right now that have legalized gambling. Missouri's going to launch in December, and all 39 of them have different sets of rules and regulations.
Yeah. Do we need a commissioner to have one or just leave it
Federalized? You want federalized?
Well, that's an issue. The last two Congresses, there's a bill was proposed this year. It's not going to go anywhere, to have some federal regulation. I think there are certain things that could be regulated that would help the industry. I think the exclusion list where Bill Speros, degenerate gambler, goes to the Massachusetts Gaming Commission and says, don't let me in the casino. Don't allow me to sign up for any of the betting apps. I have a gambling problem. I'm dealing with it, but don't allow me to bet. It's called the self-exclusion list. Every single state has those, right? But there's no federal database of that. So I could be on the Massachusetts self-exclusion list, but I'm in a degenerate rage and I drive up to the brook and wipe out the 401k before my wife wakes up because it's Sunday morning. So I would think a federal or national self-exclusion list would be a great idea. I'm sure you could have a federal, because in some states you're 18. In Kentucky, you can bet when you're 18. Ohio's 21. So if I'm 19 years old in Ohio, what am I going to do? I'm going to drive over to Kentucky and sign up because I'm a degenerate 19-year-old. And I was a degenerate 19-year-old. So I would think things like that would probably work better federally regulated. I don't think a federal tax rate would work because every state is different. Some states. Yeah. And you also have states like Florida where it's governed by a compact with the Seminole tribe, which is a whole nother bag of nuts. Because you have states like Florida where the Indian, the tribe, the Seminole tribe, and it's called the Indian Gaming Rights Act. So I'm not being politically incorrect. Where you have tribes run gambling, and because they have compacts with the state, like you see in Connecticut, like we have here in Florida and elsewhere. So I think it would be hard to have a blanket federal regulation because of stuff like that. But I would think that some federal rules, I think age limits, exclusion lists, a ban on credit, I think those things would probably work.
Well, it's been fascinating. Bob, what else you got? Anything?
No, I'm just really happy we did this show. This is great, Bill. Great job. Thank you.
I am too. It's awesome. And if you're you want to jump in and do it, go to bookies.com. That's where you should start.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I'm at Bill
Stop
Speros
right
on
there.
Twitter.
Yep.
Go ahead, say that again.
At Bill Speros
Gotcha.
on Twitter, and usually run in the Herald on Wednesdays. And
Did that social media have a big effect on gambling?
yes, very much so. I mean, there's a whole strata of influencers on social media who are tied to the gambling state. I mean, Jake Paul launched a betting site in large part because of his social media presence. It's called Better, BETR. They were actually licensed in Massachusetts for a year, but pulled out because they couldn't make a go of it. So, yeah, because the audience that gambles is very much same. The audience is very heavily invested in TikTok and Instagram, and much less so in Twitter, but still Twitter. You know, so that age group gets all of its information from social media. So social media plays a monstrous role in gambling. Also in terms of news, right? I put all my stuff, I post a lot of news on social media that I might not even necessarily write about because I know how to reach a wider audience quicker on social media. Gambling related news, Massachusetts Gaming Commission hearings, stuff like that. And there's been a lot of crazy there the last couple of years too. So yeah, social media plays a massive integral role in this.
We did a great job, Bill. Thank you.
Bill, it was terrific. Again, bookies.com or at Bill Speros, right?
Thank you.
And awesome, just awesome. And the pride of, so we say the pride of Cambridge or the pride of
Arlington. I left Cambridge. I mean, I went to Brackett School. I went to Arlington High.
Spy Ponder.
Yes, very much so. Not very athletic at the time. Still not very athletic. But you know, I loved when and where I grew up. We had a 4th reunion a couple of years ago. It was awesome. And I've lived and worked in 3 time zones in like 7 states. I went to Marquette, but you know, I was always in. I saw the Patriots play at Soldier Field in 1985 in that game where they made it past the 50-yard line once.
I was there.
I was literally the only Patriots fan in the stadium. And my roommate had season tickets for the Bears, and all these fans thought it was like a circus thing, like, right? Like, look at the Patriots fan. And the whole second half, I'm yelling for Steve Grogan. And they're wondering, why? How come you don't root for your team? Why are you yelling at your team? Aren't you a Patriots fan? I'm like, yeah, I'm yelling if they suck. You know, the whole second half, there's one guy at Soldier Field yelling, Grogan, Grogan. And my roommate is dying. He's laughing so hard. The fans behind me think I'm an absolute lunatic. So I've seen the Patriots play in Soldier Field. I saw them play at County Stadium. I've seen them play at every stadium in Florida. Not games that I covered, just games I went to as a fan. I mean, God, I saw the Red Sox play everywhere. I saw the Celtics play at the old stadium in Chicago. So working and kind of, you know, working in journalism, you bounce around a lot. But I was always, you know, it was always, hey, one of the Red Sox coming to town, one of the Celtics coming to town, one of the Bruins coming to town. So, yeah. So I sort of left, but never left.
See, I'd almost say, okay, who do you like? Do you like the Panthers or do you like the Oilers? Now, it's not who you like; it's who the algorithm.
Well, the Oilers were favored ahead of the series. I bet the Panthers at even money because I just like that number. You know, I like their chances.
But it's not who you like, Bill. Or is it who you like, or it's who the betting?
Yeah, but I bet a lot based on price. In other words, you know, you call it value betting, and you could argue that the Panthers were a good value at even money because they weren't, you know, I mean, you go down the reasons why you could like the Panthers. They've done it. I mean, look at Marshawn the other night, right? That series is over if Edmonton wins that game, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, there you go, right there. That's why I liked him for those, you know, in the Stanley Cup Finals. I think you see these other things that come into play. The goalie gets hot, and that's it. What happened in 2019? The goalie got hot. The Bruins goalie, not so much.
Yeah.
So
Right.
But to your point, Bob, yes, it is obviously what the odds makers like, what the books like, and most of the time they want to set a line to where you get a balance on both sides of it. You know, you want half the action on one side, half the action on the other side, and their cut is the odds, or the minus 110, the 10% that they take from both sides. They're happy if every game lands 50-50.
Yeah. Right.
But they had massive liabilities in the Super Bowl. They would have gotten like wiped off the face of the earth if Saquon Barkley had scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl. When he did not score, that flipped that game for the sports books, and they made a killing because every single parlay, almost 60 to 70% of them had Saquon Barkley scoring a touchdown as a leg in a 2 or 3 leg parlay, and he didn't score. He was minus 200 to score, bet 2 to win 1. And he didn't. That was a huge win for the books. So things like that, you know, really, really swing whether or not the books win or the public wins. It's fascinating stuff. Like you're right. I could do this for like 10 hours.
It's fascinating, right?
I love it. This was a fascinating conversation, and thank you so much, Bill, for coming on.
Thank
We really,
you.
really appreciate it.
I am, and now it begins other questions. I mean, damn it, Bob, just shut up and let the guy go. I'm just
Let him go, will you?
Okay, one more question.
You know how to get a hold of me. I would love to come back.
Okay,
and
other guys, why do they call?
I told everyone I was doing this with you guys, and every reaction was, "Oh my God, it's so awesome."
No, they asked, are those guys still alive? That's what they said.
Well, maybe, but hey, for me, you know, this is like.
But you mentioned that Saquon Barkley thing, and that's why people think the games are fixed. And I mean, that's why they will call out and say, he could have scored. He should have scored.
But remember,
but I'm just saying what the perception, and that's the bailout.
Well, you're right, but you have to remember there are 2 sides on every play. So the people who bet that he didn't score won. They never complain. You said the books would have been wiped out if he'd have scored. That's right. But but they priced it so high. They kept raising that. I mean, think about it. It's insane to be given that's a 67% probability that any one player is going to score a touchdown in an NFL game. That's freaking nuts.
Yeah.
But that number went up so high because people kept betting it. And they still were massively liable on the plus side. And I talked to odds makers. I'm trying to brag, but I'm in touch with a lot of these guys all the time, mainly through social media messages. And they were just like, we cannot get people to lay off this thing. And they tried because they don't want to be on the wrong side of anything that big. And they were on the wrong side of the books don't always win. I do like to point that out. The NFL favorites won 70% of the time last year. And in the fourth quarter of last year and in the first quarter of this year, DraftKings and FanDuel, who are publicly traded companies, issued earnings alerts in December and January that their first and fourth quarter earnings were going down because of the money they lost in the NFL season. DraftKings, I think it was $280 million. They had to revise downward their earnings because of the success that the public had betting the NFL last year. So the books don't always win. They do win a lot, but they don't always win. So I do like to point that out.
Well, we won today by having you. So there.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Bill. Again, bookies.com and at Bill Speros. Bill, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bob Lobel, I'm Mike Lynch. This has been a great hour. Tune in next time and make sure you follow us always on UnAnchoredBoston.com.